Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I am Attlas, and today, as you can tell, we have our Kali Yuga background happening because the topic for today is very much going to be related to that, to the times that we are in, and to the reality of those times, of the times that we are in. A reality which far too many people simply do not want to grasp. It is a reality they do not want to see. It is a reality that, they want to remain completely oblivious to. They would just rather, ignorance is bliss, right? That's the age-old adage, that old cliche. And so many people want to remain ignorant. And it's their choice. It's their choice to remain ignorant of the times that we are in. And, well, perhaps we're getting ahead of ourselves. But the title for this talk is The Great Awakening. And that title is not just a clever play on words. It is an absolute metaphysical, scientific, literal description of what is taking place here and now. The weakening of humanity, the collective weakening of humanity. And surely all of us, no matter what sources of information we turn to, no matter what circles we walk in, no matter what observations we have made of society, culture, civilization, no matter what part of the world we are from, surely all of us have witnessed directly the overwhelming evidence of the weakening of humanity. Without making a point of singling out any particular generation, it is becoming very clear, almost a cliche, but common knowledge, accepted as just, well, it is what it is, that millennials, for instance, are essentially useless. And that Gen Z, the generation after them, is potentially even worse. Is this their fault? Our goal with this talk is not to point fingers and lay blame, because that is missing the point. A lot of people are pointing fingers and laying blame. The conservatives are pointing fingers and laying blame on the liberals. Liberals are pointing fingers and laying blame on conservatives. Feminists point fingers and blame the patriarchy. Men point fingers and blame women for raising weak children, weak men. And they point fingers at the critical race theorists for weakening traditional gender roles and weakening men, creating weak men, and on and on and on it goes. Blame, 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 blame. That sort of blame is precisely the type of distraction, is precisely the kind of deflection and misdirection that the true cause of the weakening of humanity puts in place. You see, all that blame, that's part of the weakening. Divide and conquer. If you can get different groups pointing fingers and blaming one another for their ills and blaming one another for what ails them, well then, you can sit back and watch them destroy each other. Because conflict of that nature does not strengthen. It is not productive. It is not constructive. It is destructive. Like, we all know the difference between criticism for criticism's sake and constructive criticism. The criticism which is given to us out of an earnest effort to improve us or to improve our work, to create something better. That's constructive criticism. We all know what that's like. We all know what that is. And we know that straw man arguments and ad hominem attacks and just laying blame and just, he said, she said, and all of this just pettiness, the petty tribalism, which seems to be rampant no matter where you turn in the so-called culture wars, on the political front, between different identity groups, right? The whole identity politics phenomenon, it's all tribalism, base, petty tribalism. It has absolutely no foundation in reality. There are the arguments being made and the positions being taken and the rationalizations being made. It is all purely subjective. And as we know, subjectivity is illusion, is delusion. How can anyone doubling down on a subjective position, digging in their heels, right? Digging their trenches, hunkering down, preparing for the battle to defend their tribe, their color, their race, their creed, their sex, their gender, their queer identity, and on and on and on and on it goes. Their tribe. Completely made up, fictitious, fantastical, and utterly irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. And when we mean the grand scheme of things, you know that we talk the big, big picture, the real big picture, the biggest of big pictures. The picture that actually matters. The picture that's actually real. The picture which is foundational, the foundation itself, the light. And the picture show, the pantomime, right? The shadows on the wall of Plato's cave. That's all the illusion and the delusion and the subjectivity. The light is what creates the capacity for shadow in the first place. It's the light that creates the capacity for the moving pictures in cinema. And the film in the projector is very much like a subjective filter running at 24 frames per second in front of the light and modifying that light. And that's the allegory of Plato's cave, but in a modern context. We get mesmerized and hypnotized by the characters on the screen, and we identify with the characters on the screen and the action and the circumstances and the emotions and all the rest of it. And if we're watching a documentary, we become attached and we identify to this or that rationalization and theory and opinion and so on and so forth. We get caught up in the story and we forget the light which makes all of that story possible, without which there is no film. Filter or no filter, there's no movie. But no one goes to the movies, or no one sits at home and puts on an exercise tape. Well, that's dating ourselves, right? Back from the 80s, right? No one puts on a Jane Fonda workout video. No one watches an exercise video sitting on the couch, expecting to get into shape, because they are watching the exercise video. If someone did that and they watched other people working out as they sat on the couch, eating their potato chips, and they believed that they were getting stronger because they were watching an exercise video of someone lifting weights, we would look at that person and we would say, not only are you delusional, not only are you utterly weak-minded, you are getting weaker and weaker and weaker. The more you sit watching that exercise video from the sofa, the weaker and weaker you will become. It's self-evident. We're going to just take a pause really quick here to share with all of you the StreamYard link, if anybody feels so inclined to jump on board and participate in today's live stream. Here it is, and it's in the chat. The impetus for today's talk came from an exchange that we had with someone on Facebook. And this individual wasn't advocating for the great mass global awakening. No, he wasn't doing that. We'll give him credit for that. But what he was advocating for, what he was preaching, and he was very much proselytizing. It wasn't just, this is what I believe, or here, I put this out there and, take it or leave it. Was a very prescriptive, this is what you need to do, and stop doing that, and stop doing this, and stop doing the other thing. All you need to do is XYZ. And the XYZ that he was advocating for was to get into the great nothingness, the great silence, the great nothing. Everything is nothing. Nothing is real. Everything reduces into nothing. Everything came from the great nothing. Everything returns to the great nothing. And all you need to do is get to that place of nothing. In Buddhism, they would refer to it as shunyata in meditation, right? Calm abiding. And then when you know that, and you have that place, and you know that place, you can live from that place. Nothing else matters. Don't worry about anything else. Just that's what it's all about. And as if this person had intimate knowledge of the nature of the absolute. And we don't doubt for a moment that this individual has experienced shunyata in meditation. It's not difficult. Even a relative beginner with diligence and consistency can, after a relative short amount of time, experience shunyata, or calm abiding. That means a completely quiet mind and true meditation in that space, that emptiness, the nothingness. The problem is that's the beginning of meditation. Everything that we do, all the techniques and everything that we do to get us there, gets us to the beginning of that nothing space. The fact of the matter is that the nothing is filled with something. But it doesn't become something until we interact with it. Until then, it's just unmanifested light. But that great light exists in the great treasury of the light. And the light and the love and the truth, and it's all in the great nothingness. And it all emerges from the absolute. But to believe, as this individual clearly does, that all we have to do is get into the nothingness and, oh, that's it. That's the nature of reality. That's the nature of the universe. Oh, it's so nice and peaceful and quiet here. And yeah, okay, great. Okay, good. My work is done. My journey is done. I got into the nothingness and that's it. This is delusional. This is nothing but the ego mind projecting its own conceptual rationalizations onto an experience. The absolute is not empty. The nothingness is not nothing. It's everything, but in its unmanifested potentiality. And that means that our as yet unmanifested potentiality is likewise exists in that space, which is why we meditate and why we go into meditation, to seek information. What is information? Information. That's why our YouTube channel is called Attlas Information. It is the as yet unformed, unmanifested light in potentiality, truth in potentiality, which in the absolute exist as nothingness and must come into formation for it to be known, knowable to itself. This we can experience directly. This is the point. And the return to the absolute is to return and bring with us the experiential knowledge that we have gained and accumulated throughout many, many countless lifetimes. And we return to the absolute if we achieve that level, if we can free ourselves from that which shackles us to the world of form, the illusional, delusional levels of reality. And we can reconnect with our true formlessness, our true nature as pure light. Then we can join the great fraternity. We like to call it the great fraternity of trees, or the great brotherhood of trees, because we fell from a tree as a seed, as a spark, an essence, a monad. We were born of that forest, and we fell to the earth as a seed falls from the tree to the earth. And yes, the tree is part of the forest, no question. And the seed is part of the forest. But the seed is not yet a member of the brotherhood of trees. It's just a seed. And for the seed to become a member of the brotherhood of trees, the seed has to die. The seed has to break. The shell in which the seed is bound must crack. And the stuff, the hume, that the substance, the form of the seed must be transmuted so that the sapling can grow and develop, take root and grow. And then that sapling becomes first a sprout, right? And then the sprout becomes a sapling. And the sapling becomes a young tree. And then that young tree has something to contribute to the forest. Its beingness, its very presence is now a contribution to the brotherhood of trees. But as a seed is just a tree in potentiality. To take this analogy one step further, some seeds are locked within a fruit, like apple seeds. And if you've ever gone apple picking, you know that for every apple you pick from the tree, there are 2 or 3 dozen apples rotting under your feet. That analogy is what we're going to be working with for our analysis of this terribly, terribly misunderstood mass global awakening garbage. Because as we stated in the description to this video, people use that concept of awakening in every conceivable facet of life. So conspiracy theorists believe that they are awake because they believe all the conspiracies and they can see through the facade of the mainstream media and the evil empires and the evil governments and all the BS front stories, the cover stories. And because the conspiracy theorists have figured out XYZ conspiracies, well, then the conspiracy theorist thinks of himself as awake. And you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist necessarily. You could maybe just be a libertarian who sees through the facade of so-called democratic politics in the United States, for instance. And you can see through the fact that the powers that be actually control both sides and that the whole thing is a sham. And so you're telling other people to wake up, awaken, and see that the only real path is anarchy, or the libertarian path, the path of no government, no politics, no this, no that, right? Because it's all a sham. And so you believe yourself to be awake. And you're calling out to all the sleeping masses, all the sheeple, right? To wake up. And then there's the so-called woke, who do also believe themselves to be awake, who look at the way things are in the West and around the world, and all they see is patriarchy and colonialism and sexism and misogyny and homophobia and racism. And because that's what they see, and they claim they can see through all of that, they can see through into the institutions and into the underlying foundations, and they see that all of those isms are systemic. It's systemic racism, it's systemic misogyny, it's systemic homophobia, and on and on and on it goes. So they believe they are awake because they see all that, whereas everybody else doesn't, you see. So they're the woke. They have awoken, they're awake. Then there's the self-help people and the new age people, and we lump them in together because there's so much overlap between the two. And the positive thinkers and the ones who believe and they see themselves as co-creators of their reality. And they've read a few articles on quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and they say, see, look at the observer effect. You see, it's proof that I create my reality. And so I'm going to sit and I'm going to manifest my desires. I'm going to manifest the life that I want. I'm going to manifest the house that I want, the job that I want, the car that I want, the spouse that I want, the vacation that I want. And because I know how to do all this stuff, and because I see that it's actually possible to do, and then I can cure my cancer with crystals and positive thinking, I am awake. Or because I'm a successful entrepreneur, and I used to be down and out, and I started with nothing, but because of the power of positive thinking, look, I built myself a small empire, multi-million-dollar empire of XYZ, or who knows. Or I sell vitamins out of my basement, but I'm making 6 figures a month selling vitamins out of my basement in a multi-level marketing scheme. But you see, I'm awake because I've done that. And look at all those poor schleps still going to work 8 hours a day and making a pittance. They're all asleep, but I'm awake because I'm a successful, positive, self-help entrepreneur. We could go on and on and on and on. And many of these groups that we describe subscribe to the notion that because in their particular echo chamber, they see people doubling down and becoming more and more intense in their beliefs about how awake they are and how their cause is spreading, is advancing, is growing. The numbers of people in their camp, they're increasing in numbers. They have new members coming all the time, and there is a intensification of beliefs. They don't think of it as dogmatism. They don't think of it as fanaticism. They don't think of it as obsession. They look at it as passion. And they see more and more people joining their ranks, passionately expressing their desire to be a part of this movement. Because of that, they see this kind of snowballing effect. And the snowball, they leap to the conclusion that the snowball, it's inevitable, that the snowball will eventually reach a critical mass, and then everybody will jump on board their particular train of thought, their particular philosophy, their particular outlook, everybody will join their particular camp. And the result will be a mass global awakening. Speak to someone who's woke. Eventually, you will get to a point in the conversation when they say, no, it's inevitable. Eventually, the whole planet is going to be woke. It'll have to be, because it's right, because it's the natural evolution of humanity that we all be woke, that we have equity, and that equality of outcomes, that everybody has equality of outcomes. It's the only natural, balanced way that the universe can be, that the world can be, has to be in balance. Everybody has to be able to get the same. Everybody has to be able to treat it the same. Meanwhile, they don't treat everybody the same. White heterosexual males are trampled on and ridiculed at every possible opportunity. But let's not get into those kinds of details. The bottom line is, every group that you go to, New Age, self-help, conspiracy theorists, the anti-government, the libertarians or the anarchists, or the atheists, who also believe themselves to be woke. I mean, hell, they called the 19th century the Enlightenment, for God's sake. The great scientific revolution, the great revolution of materialist science, when the scientific method became the be-all and the end-all arbiter of truth. They called that enlightenment. So really, the materialist scientists and the academics and the intellectuals, they've been the first woke. They've been woke or awake ever since the Enlightenment. And their ability to push for more and more schooling, more and more so-called education and higher education, always pushing more people and more people to get more degrees. Why? Because it's inevitable that that's how we're going to awaken everybody and enlighten everybody, through education, through the intellect. So the mass global awakening is inevitable. It's snowballing. It's coming. No matter where you turn, in some way, shape, or form, we can turn to the transhumanists. Okay, Elon Musk and Ray Kurzweil and Google and others, they want to put chips inside your head. And they call it Human 2.0. And if only we can get a chip in everybody's head, then we can turn those chips on, and then the whole of humanity will be transformed into Human 2.0. What is that? If not a mass global awakening? Just masked, just hidden under technocratic euphemisms and some technocratic abomination of nature, which they have yet to perfect. The so-called chip implants. Or let's go to perhaps the original grand global awakening, the Christian rapture. Oh, when Christ is going to return to the earth, and all the believers and all the faithful are going to be, raised from the dead, and we're all going to be taken into heaven, and they're going to be taken into heaven, or we're going to have a new golden age, and Christ will rule for 1,000 years. It's and all you have to do is believe that Jesus is your savior. Right? Like, that's the key. We didn't make a point of this as we were giving you the examples, because we were hoping in your own process and your own experience with these different groups and these different narratives, these different paradigms, have you ever noticed that there's no effort involved? It's inevitable. It's like Smith from The Matrix, right? Who says, it's inevitable. Like it's the snowball rolling down the mountain, right? It's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It's inevitable. Eventually it's going to swallow up the whole mountain. Everyone who believes in the Great Awakening, no matter what version of it, the one common attribute between all of them is that it's an inevitability and that everyone is going to awaken. It's a mass global awakening. It's precipitous, it's automatic, it's spontaneous. It's like all of humanity is going to fall off a cliff and into a vast ocean of woke, of whatever, enlightenment. What's that expression? There's that really, it used to be an old expression. Oh yes, he fell out of the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down. Well, this is how people think about this mass global awakening. That people are going to fall out of the enlightenment tree and hit every branch on the way down. When they finally hit the ground, they're going to be completely enlightened. They're going to be totally awake. That it takes no effort, just like gravity, right? It's going to be just like that. Easy peasy. Just like our friend who says, oh, just go into shunyata, just calm your mind and go into the darkness, go into the nothingness, you're done. That's all you need to do. All you need to do is let all this bullshit, all this delusion, all this illusion fall away. It's like falling out of the tree and coming back down to the ground. Or like throw yourself into the well, right? Just throw yourself. It's like falling into a well. All of humanity is going to fall into the well, going to fall into the great darkness, the nothingness, and boom, we're all going to be enlightened. And then we're going to have heaven on earth. Couple quick comments. Azazel, if that's the case, it is strange that we haven't had a new ice age yet, considering the big snowball. Okay, true. And Eduardo says, equity, tell that to the zebra that gets caught by the lion. Yeah, exactly. Well, look, logic and reason and just sort of reality doesn't phase these people. Their delusions are so entrenched that reality is simply just another construct, just another form of racism and patriarchy that needs to be deconstructed. Even biology, right? They've even deconstructed biology, right? So they hate white men, white heterosexual men, telling them about reality. And as soon as they find out you're a straight white male, mansplaining, right? Then that is enough reason for them to discount everything that you have to say. Why? Because you're a part of the heteronormative, misogynist, homophobic patriarchy. Oh, and racist patriarchy. Sorry, forgot the perhaps the most important one. So, so reality, like, you know what, recently you can run into these articles all the time. Recently they declared that mathematics was racist. Was it racist or no, it was it racist or sexist? Pretty sure they said it was racist. Forget about the fact that the Arabic numbers, right, come from the Persian Empire and everything. Forget about all that, right? I mean, again, reality doesn't doesn't affect these people. They are so in their delusion that that I mean, we have an entire article that we wrote on SJWs and the ultimate no-win scenario because they're sociopathic narcissists and they're passive aggressive. So if you throw the truth at them, you're just giving them ammunition to hunker down and defend themselves, and they turn it around to gaslight you and make you the enemy, right? Because to them, the truth, they can always twist the truth into being some kind of affront to my truth, right? Because that's the foundation of critical race theory, of postmodernism, is that there is no objective truth. All of the humanities have been teaching this for 30 years now, that objective truth does not exist, that all truths exist in language, and language is a completely arbitrary semiotic system that is founded on the differences between letters and words and the difference of meaning between letters and words. And that's Derrida, okay? That's his clever, these are the French postmodernists, okay? They're the ones who invented all this crap. Derrida was the one who came up with it's in French, it's a very clever pun, différence, okay? That means to differ and to defer. It's very similar in English, to differ and to defer. But we spell it differently in English, but in French, it's the same word, différence. And then the other big one was Michel Foucault, who added that everything is a dominance hierarchy. So not only is all meaning deferred and based on differences, but then Michel Foucault came and then added to that, layered on top of that, that all meaning is derived, all that difference and difference is derived through a dominance hierarchy, which means that even the meaning of a word only exists because somebody chose one meaning over another meaning, and someone deferred all other meanings in favor of this one meaning, and that the various different meanings and powers of words. So if it seems like we have an excessive understanding of this, it's because we studied this garbage in university. We took English and drama, so we were forced. All this garbage was forced down our throat. We were in the humanities, so we studied that. You know what Sun Tzu said, right? Know your enemy. Well, that's not why we went into the humanities. We thought we were going into the humanities to understand narrative and allegory and structuring allegory and comprehending mythology and high art through storytelling. But that's not what we were being taught. We were being taught how to deconstruct everything, and so that everything is subjective and all meaning is subjective. And if any particular interpretation is held more true than another, well, that's a dominance hierarchy, and that's most likely being forced by some colonial, sexist, misogynist, patriarchal, systemically racist structure. Oh, but they're awake, right? They're awake. This is the hyper intellectual rationalizations at the very foundation of that movement. But they're awake. Sorry, we got off on a little bit of a tangent there on the woke stuff. But when you look into the heart of all of these versions of the Great Awakening, you find at their heart such mechanicity, such rationalizations of a highly refined, technical, mechanical argumentation. This is your clue, because the mass global awakening is presented as on the one hand an inevitable natural evolution of humanity, but in many circles, certainly New Age circles and Christian circles, it's presented as a supernatural, magical, spiritual, divine phenomenon. It's very interesting. It's very interesting how the different camps can arrive at the same type of phenomenon, and their rationalizations and justifications, their narratives around it can be so different fundamentally, and yet they're all basically saying the same thing, just in different flavors. And again, that's a clue, because remember what we began the entire talk with today about subjectivity and about illusion and delusion. And the mind can rationalize every sin under the sun. Rest assured that the 1%, right, the millionaires and the billionaires and the power brokers and everyone else at Davos and World Economic Forum and rest assured that they all have perfectly rational excuses for doing everything that they're doing. It makes perfect sense to them in their own minds. None of them are under any, none of them are pricked by their conscience in any way, shape, or no. They're doing what's best for humanity. They're doing what's best for the planet. They're doing what's best for the environment. They're doing, whatever. But none of them believe in any sort of mass global awakening. So we'll grant them that. But that's because most of them are, or many of them are, awakened members of the Black Lodge. So the Black Lodge doesn't believe in a mass global awakening. They know there's no mass global awakening coming. They know that. That's funny thing is that they might promote it through the New Age, through all of these different groups, through all these egotistical ways. They promote the natural, but they know it's a lie. The Black Lodge knows it's a lie. But then again, the Black Lodge is in the business of lying. That's their business. That's their job. And why do they lie? Why do they get people to believe their lies? Because knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. So as long as you can keep people believing bullshit narratives, those people remain weak. It is not true that your beliefs make you strong. No, your beliefs make you weak. You believe in yourself? This doesn't make you strong. It makes you weak. How do we know that? The millennials and Gen Z, 2 generations raised to, quote, believe in themselves, raised with positivity. They were never told you can't do this or you can't do that, or this is crap, or this is shit, or this is this, or this is that. No. And everybody got trophies for showing up. participation awards, and there was no merit, there was no struggle, there was no anything. It was equity across the board. Everybody's a winner, everybody's a winner, everybody's a winner. Right? Because they all believe they can do whatever they want and they can be anything that they want. They believe and they believe and they believe and they believe and they believe. And they are completely, utterly useless. Couple quick comments really fast, and then we're going to carry on that flow. Benjamin, who is our resident biblical scholar here, he loves to chime in with relevant quotations. Quote, "They perish because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. For this reason, God sends them a powerful delusion so that they will believe the lie, and so that all will be condemned who have not believed the truth, but have delighted in wickedness." And that's from the 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 10 to 12. And Benjamin follows up by saying, yes, that is true, especially religions who repeat their lies until it becomes the belief of the followers. And as Azazel says, they definitely know that too. Yeah, the Black Lodge definitely knows that too. And to some degree, Gen Z and the millennials know that too. To some degree, the ones who have some semblance of self-awareness know that they're completely useless. They know that they can't, some of them can't even fix their own lunch. I was able to, when I was old enough, and I went to school, my brother and I both walked to school, and without a chaperone, and I was 7 or 8 years old. My mom decided that she would go and get a part-time job to help with the finances, because there was no reason for her to be home all day. We were in school all day, so why should she be at home all day? And but that meant that many times I came home from school and my mother was still at work, and she would be at work until 6 o'clock. And then shortly after that, my father would come home. That means 8 years old, sometimes it fell on me to prepare dinner, to cook dinner, not just for myself, not just this afternoon after school snack or whatever. No, to prepare dinner for my brother and my mother and my father. They came home from work and they were tired and everything. My mother was not going to start cooking. And I recently had a get together with an old high school friend who has a young teenage son who can barely make a sandwich. Consider 100 years ago, what children between the ages of 7 to 12, what was expected of them. It didn't matter if they worked on farms or they were in the city, because 100 years ago, 1923, in a few short years would come the Great Depression. And just think how many youngsters and how many young boys ended up being the primary breadwinner in the family, because in those days, women couldn't go down to work on the docks, right? It wasn't the feminist movement hadn't taken hold yet, hadn't taken over yet. So, and if a young man had 2 or 3 sisters, well, his mother had to look after his sisters. She couldn't go to work. If his father passed away because his father died in an industrial accident, which were very, very, very common back in those days, because there were no safety standards, right? And we're talking about the height of the Industrial Revolution here, or that Iron Age Industrial Revolution. No safety standards, no safety equipment, barely any training. It was more or less, oh yeah, watch the other guys, right? And then you'll pick it up as you go along. So many adult men lost their lives. And then, of course, let's not forget that little episode known as World War I, when the adult male population of working age, those men in their prime, those young men in their prime, were slaughtered by the hundreds of thousands in the trenches, which meant that back home, young boys didn't have any choice. They had to grow up real quick. And we're talking working every conceivable industrial, dangerous, difficult, and the same can be said for previous generations, and the same can be said for generations afterwards, all the way up through the 50s, through the Second World War. And what's the I don't know exactly, but that group is what's referred to as the greatest generation. The greatest generation who lived through those wars and endured all manner of suffering, all manner of adversity. And you didn't see. Now, granted, terms like shell shock came into the popular vernacular, but generally speaking, shell shock and battle fatigue really was limited to individuals on the battlefield. There was not, the greatest generation went through what it went through, and there was not this uh, uh, epidemic in mental illness as we have today. Just can you imagine any of the millennials or any of the Gen Z who can you imagine any of them being put into a World War I trench, or being put into a bomber and being parachuted behind enemy lines, or being sent to storm the beaches of Normandy? It is laughable. They're contemporary heroes and icons on the screen, like people like Timothy Chalamet. They wouldn't even be able to pick up a Tommy gun, a rifle, or carry the 50 pounds of equipment that an infantryman has to carry with him. They couldn't do. They look like a swift breeze will blow them over. Mugaboo22 says, people change when they are faced with deep pain, death, terrible situations. Why would we change if we are comfortable? We have a saying in my country, ears listen when the eyes turn red. Well, listen, some people rise to the challenge. That's true. But look around you. Look around in the West. We're specifically talking now in countries that live a Western lifestyle or are aspiring to the Western lifestyle. Talk to an employer who is facing working with millennials and Gen Z, and they have to tell them, no, you're not doing your job properly. And next thing you know, they're getting a message from HR that employee has taken 6 months sick leave for depression. or they're filing a complaint for verbal violence, for on-the-job harassment, for um, for psychological abuse, because their boss told them they're not doing their job properly. They need to work harder, or they need to work smarter, or they need to work better. We're not making this up. Mental illness is at epidemic proportions here in the West. Epidemic proportions. And the woke culture is systematic in the breakdown of, for example, strong men, strong maleness, because of course they're all about deconstructing the patriarchy. But guess what? The patriarchy built civilization. Now, was it a good civilization? It's corrupt. It has all sorts of problems. But strong men have their place. There are benefits to being a strong masculine force in society. But the masculine force is under incessant attack from the left. They are attacking even the notions of gender itself. So, and the result is you're getting more and more effeminate men, and the numbers, it's scientifically demonstrable. Sperm counts are down, fertility is down. You can look at the statistics. They don't lie. Testosterone levels are down across the board. It's men are becoming more and more effeminate. They're less and less men and more wet noodles. Why? That's really an hour in now. Why? Why is the Black Lodge doing all this? Weakening. And again, we've talked about in the past, woke, undermining, right? Deconstructing, undermining history, rewriting history, undermining culture, undermining religion. And again, undermining biology, undermining, deconstructing, weakening, creating illusion and delusion in place of objective fact, in place of objective reality, getting people more and more into their delusion. Why? Why? What is their goal of weakening humanity? Surely the people at the top, because in the past, they've been able to profit from strong men and strong women and resilient women. How else can they have their wars? Like, what good is it? What good is it for them? This completely useless generations of millennials and Gen Z. What use can they possibly have? Except to be completely and totally and utterly vulnerable. Because while we appreciate what Mugaboo is saying here, and in no uncertain terms, there's no question that when we talk about the masses and the general public and there is always a group, there's always individuals who are standouts. There are always individuals who can rise to the challenge and face the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune and pick up the gauntlet that life has thrown at their feet and pick up the mantle and pick up the banner and charge headlong into whatever hardship that confronts them. There is no question that individuals like that have always existed and will always exist. And we made this point in the description of the video. is that individual achievement is always possible, but that is individual. When there is a movement that is enacting a systematic dismantling and undermining and weakening of all of the foundations and structures of civilization and culture and society, many individuals find their inner strength and find their path and make their own way in response to the impending collapse, because they're seeing everybody else around them become weaker and weaker and weaker and dumber and dumber and dumber and more asleep. And they say, I'm not going to be like them. I'm not going to wind up like them. I'm going to follow my own way. And many individuals, you can have like, this is very interesting. You know, they've done studies like this where identical twins who were raised in the same household, obviously, as siblings, and then they went off to war, and they were in the same regiment, in the same company, and they experienced the same traumatic event, and one of them ended up shell-shocked and the other one didn't. They have done studies, psychologists have, and geneticists have, and sociologists have done studies looking into this phenomenon, where identical twins from the same class, the same household, the same upbringing, the same education, and the same genetics experience the same event and have diametrically opposed responses to that event. This just demonstrates the power of individuality and the individuated nature of existence and the individuated nature of our being, because DNA and class and upbringing and education be damned, identical twins do not have the same monad. They do not have the same divine soul. They are two different beings. Their 3D spacesuit is all but irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. And psychologists have demonstrated that in their studies of identical twins and other siblings, where one becomes an overachiever and one takes a completely different path. So, individuality is always a possibility, and individual achievement is always there. But individuals are not the masses. And individual achievement and the outliers, right? The Mozarts, the Beethovens, take in any field, right? The overachievers, the highest producers, whatever you want to call them, the most successful, whatever you want to call them, even on either side of the spectrum, you're always looking at a minority. You're always looking at a minority of individuals. The vast majority in the middle are awash and just are going with the flow, just swimming with the current, swimming with the school of fish. It's all they know how to do. And many potential high achievers, many have the potential of awakening to their own individual spiritual individuality, but they get hypnotized and they get comfortable and they get mesmerized by stories and lies told to them over and over and over again. Lies like the great awakening, the mass global awakening. And it is a great awakening. These are the vulnerable. These are the weak. These are the stupid, the ignorant. And we don't say that in a hateful way. We don't say that in a judgmental way. We just say it in a factual way. They're blind. And it is so easy to point your finger and blame others, but the fact of the matter is they're blinded and made ignorant by their own mind. The Black Lodge is not out there. The Black Lodge is in here and in here. Truly. And so many follow their sentimental hearts instead of their superior heart center and their superior emotions. They get tugged by their sentimentality, and they get tugged by their fear and their desires. They need no one outside of them. They want to belong. They are afraid of being alone. They are afraid of going it alone. They're afraid of sticking their neck out, of taking risks, of taking a chance, of being judged weird by the crowd, by the masses. This is what is meant. This is what is meant by to be or not to be. That's right. We're not about blame here. Remember that. We said at the outset, we're not here to blame anyone. We're here to explain what's going on and why. Is it scary? To say it's scary, we know what you mean. We know what you mean by saying it's scary. But because fear is one of the, I mean, we did a live stream on this not long ago, right? And we're pretty much certain that it's actually going to be the title of one of our books coming that we're going to writing this year. The Pimp of Babylon. The Pimp of Babylon. Fear is the pimp of Babylon. And lust is the whore of Babylon. Desire and fear. And it just so happens that we rewatched The Matrix Resurrections last night, and it's right in. It just turns out that it's in The Matrix. It's in the fourth one, right? The newest one, because the analyst, formerly known as the architect, says, you know, my version of the Matrix is more efficient and more effective and generates more energy than any of the previous versions of the Matrix. Why? Because I figured out that you have to situate everybody in between these two states of desperately reaching for what they want while dreading losing what they have. Fear and desire. And it's in between those two places where you create that tension and that panic and that worry and that anxiety. That's what generates the most energy. Because in the Matrix, the AIs are siphoning electromagnetic energy and heat off of humanity, off of the bodies whose minds are in the matrix. And so the analyst, whereas his predecessor, the architect, did things a certain way, he figured out how to get even more energy. And that's exactly what the egos do to us, what the Black Lodge does to us. They have us chasing the things that we want and fighting against the things that we don't want, right? So craving and aversion, that's desire. So you're chasing what you want and you're resisting what you don't want. So that's striving and resisting. So think about how much energy those two activities take. And then you have dreading the loss of what you already have. So now you have to defend yourself and you have to protect your property. You have to protect what's yours. You have to defend your beliefs, your identifications, your attachments. And what's not expressed in the matrix, but what you should all know by now, that control and fear go hand in hand. The desire to control outcomes, the desire for comfort and security, to control one's own fate by controlling circumstances and people around oneself. And how much energy and effort we spend on that. And it's right there in the matrix, in explicitly stated. Azazel says, yes, and we were told once that envy seeks the lovers. Envy is interesting because envy always wants what it cannot have. So how clever is that? And how much energy and effort do you pump into that which is forbidden fruit? So you were talking about why and the great awakening and why. Okay, another quick comment here. Azazel says precisely, and then Benjamin adds, that's so true. The age span of millennials and Gen Z fit into the movie. So true. We've said before that one of the purposes, one of the reasons why the Black Lodge rules humanity in the Iron Age is because they are tasked with helping to destroy humanity. This is what the great awakening is all about. Because the reason why we brought up young people 100 years ago and the greatest generation and what it had to endure, and pose the question, right? When young people today are taking sick leave because their boss said something to them, how, if we continue raising generations in the same way, how do you think the majority, how do you think they will react to some massive global cataclysm? Will they have the intestinal fortitude? Forget about the know-how, forget about the skills, the practical skills, and the experience to be able to deal with the actual logistics of some sort of global catastrophe. But just psychologically, if they can't even handle being told that they're not doing their work properly, how are they going to handle a great flood or a comet strike or or pole shift or worldwide earthquakes or whatever catastrophic event which brings everything that they know and their way of life crashing to the ground around them? How are they going to cope with that? They can't even make a sandwich. I mean, come on. You can't even give them constructive criticism. They fall to pieces. The snowflake generations. How are they going to survive some sort of calamity? Now, not everybody is swallowing the woke Kool-Aid, right? Sorry, drinking the woke Kool-Aid. And not everybody is getting snared on that hook, hook, line, and sinker. So there is a huge contingency of the population that's reacting violently. And that's the right, the conservative, the Christians, and so on. Not just the Christians, the Judeo-Christians, but the conservative right, and things like the preppers, the doomsday preppers, and so on. They, as you probably know, in the United States, certainly, many of them live in, let's say, more rural areas, or even if they are in suburbs, but they're not really, city dwellers in that sense. But many of them live on farms or homesteads, or they have more land or property or whatever, or they go hunting. They're gun owners. And they teach their kids how to hunt and how to fish and how to, skin animals and how to, clean fish and all these practical sorts of things, these traditional practical sorts of down to earth life skills. And they bring them up with a traditional upbringing, conservative upbringing, religious upbringing, and so on and so forth. And you will also see, in reaction to the fact that males are becoming more effeminate and weaker and this and that there's an entire movement against that, this of movement of hypermasculinity, of men who are adamant on bodybuilding and body sculpting and body shaping, and they take, and some of them are natural, but a lot of them take supplements and they'll take synthetic testosterone, or they'll take other performance enhancing drugs and so on to get lean, to get big, to get whatever, right? And they're doing these hyper masculine things and so on and so forth. And just as the conservatives are doubling down on their traditions and their cultures and their strong, strict, inflexible way of thinking and doing, and you'll see that in other dogmatic religions and fanatical cultural traditions around the world, and they think that's making them strong. They think that they can see through the woke bullshit, and so they're awake. And they're awaiting the Christian rapture and everything else. But they also have this intuitive knowing that, stuff is going to go south, right? Because they've read the book of Revelations most likely, and they believe in the book of Revelations, and even though they say on the other end of that, there's the rapture and the great whatever, but we have to get through that first. So we have to have these practical skills to be able to survive. And we have to be able to be strong and endure and so on and so forth. The thing is that all of that comes part and parcel with a very rigid psychological belief system and a very rigid dogmatic cultural framework that may or may not have been appropriate for the Piscean age, but is definitely not appropriate for the Kali Yuga and the Aquarian age. Because we are in the Iron Age of this humanity, we're in the Kali Yuga, but we are already in the Aquarian age. And the Aquarian age, as the water bringer, is change. And flexibility will trump any sort of Piscean ideal about strength. You see, the kind of rigidity and strength that came from that patriarchal mindset that was infused with the Piscean values. Now, the Piscean energy is, one can relate it to Neptune's trident. It's right. It's very, or you can relate it to Mjolnir, right? Thor's hammer. What happens to the tree in the typhoon or in the hurricane? What happens to the trees that don't bend with the wind? What happens to them? So in the Great Awakening, we see this double whammy. We see a deliberate weakening of the populace on one hand, and then we see a reaction to that weakening of another segment of the populace doubling down and hunkering down and digging their heels in and clinging to, tight-fisted, clinging to their rigid sets of beliefs and values and upbringing and philosophies, etc. But the winds of change are blowing, and the tsunami is coming. And the trees that do not bend in the wind, they snap in two like matchsticks. And a population that's weak and not grounded in anything, well, they're just going to get swept away. This is not by accident. This is by design. Mechanical nature must get rid of this humanity. And the Black Lodge works for mechanical nature. Egos work for mechanical nature. And it's not, you don't have to take it personally. It's not meant to be taken personally. It just is what it is. Have you ever boiled water? Sure you have. Everybody, even millennials and Gen Z have boiled water. Okay, let's not take that away from them. So all of us have boiled water before for one purpose or another. Now, have you observed boiling water in the pot? You've observed it. It's boiling, it's bubbling over. You got a rapid boil going. All that water is at a minimum 100 degrees centigrade. It's reached boiling temperature. How long does it take to evaporate a pot of boiling water? Now, according to science, once water reaches the boiling point, it turns into water vapor. And you can see that. You can see steam coming from the pot of boiling water. Now, all of the molecules of water in the pot are boiling. And you can sit there boiling that water and watching it for hours. What's going on there? We've turned up the heat. All the molecules have access to the heat. And the intensification of that heat is visible on their behavior as liquid water. Look at the behavior of the liquid water. And look how few escape and become water vapor. This is just the nature of things. This is just reality. Theoretically, a physics book can say that when water reaches 100 degrees centigrade, it becomes water vapor. Or, whatever temperature is officially. But we know that some water evaporates, but the vast majority of water does not. But it is also true that if the water was completely cool, with no heat applied, some molecules would be evaporating. In fact, if you pour an ice tray and freeze it, and you have an ice tray in your freezer, and you leave that ice tray untouched for long enough, weeks, months, you open up your freezer and go and grab your ice tray. What happened to my ice cubes? They're gone. Or all that's left are these tiny little bits of ice in the bottom of the tray. What happened to my ice? It evaporated. Now, the pot of water on the stove at 100 degrees will take hours to evaporate. The ice cubes in the tray in the freezer took weeks to evaporate, but evaporation was still there for individual molecules. And the relative temperatures of the refrigerator and the boiling pot, of course, made an impact on the individual molecule's ability to evaporate. As above, so below. As within, so without. Water molecules, to the best of my knowledge, have no politics, have no religion, have no history, have none of that, none of the trappings of any of that this nonsense that we talk about. And to the best of my knowledge, water molecules do not meditate. But molecules, each and every water molecule has its own monad. each and every water molecule is an individuated essence. The molecule, the water molecule itself, is just its physical body, but its monad exists as an elemental in the fourth dimension, an elemental of the mineral kingdom, a sylph or sylphid of the air, or no, it's, a mermaid or merman of the water, because it's water. So you see, even in water, there is no mass evaporation of water, but it is easier for individuals to awaken, because what's turning up the heat on humanity is the Christ. It's the cosmic forces, the cosmic rays, the Christic forces. The fire of fire and the light of lights is being turned up on humanity. All prophecy, well, certainly Christian prophecy and Judeo-Christian prophecy in Revelations, the Christ will return in the end times. But Christ is not a man. It's not Jesus who's getting off a spaceship or stepping off a cloud. It's the Christ. The cosmic Christ is a force, and that force is active on each and every monad of creation, in each and every monad of this planet. Within each and every one of us, the Christ is active, and the heat is being turned up. It's intensifying. And we are witnessing that intensification across the board. And that intensification has its corollary in mechanical nature. That intensification is felt in consciousness, meaning it's felt in our free consciousness, and it is felt in our consciousness, which is bottled up inside of the egos. We said in the description to today's live stream, we said the same forces which ripen apples on the tree, that make them ripe for the plucking, ripe for the picking. Those are the same forces which cause hundreds upon hundreds of more apples to fall from the tree and rot and return to the earth as rotten apples. Again, we repeat, exactly the same forces which ripen the apple and make it ripe for the picking cause hundreds more to fall to the earth and rot and become rotten apples. The same heat which causes a handful of molecules to escape the water and become water vapor cause the rest of the pot to remain trapped and boiling over, because they can't break free of their liquid state. They can't find their individuality. They can't escape their bonds, because there is water bonds, water molecules bond to one another. And that's why we have this thing called surface tension on water, that even insects can walk on it, right? It's that surface tension. It's always individual molecules which break free. And that tension is that forms that layer. And what that means is that the more we are identified and attached to our egos, to this physical reality, to our beliefs, whatever. As the temperature gets dialed up beneath us, whatever parts of us that are bottled up inside of mechanical nature, the intensification of the Christ on us is going to be increasing the activity of the fire within us. But that's more of an opportunity for the egos to capture and use and harness that fire to express themselves that much more intensely. You can warm up the temperature of a room, and the oxygen molecules will want to expand because of the increased heat. Just as the oxygen inside of a balloon will want to expand, but it'll expand the balloon. There's no guarantee the balloon's going to pop. The balloon becomes bigger. So, if you have one of those rooms full of balloons and you increase the temperature, the balloons are going to get bigger and they're going to squeeze out all the remaining oxygen because the balloons are going to be expanding. There's no guarantee the balloons are going to pop. But an expanded balloon is so much more fragile. An expanded balloon is so much more vulnerable. Because as that balloon expands, its elasticity stretched to the very boundaries of its ability to maintain its composure. And then any little remotely sharp, remotely offensive insult against that ultra stretched, ultra thin membrane will cause that balloon to pop. But the popping of that balloon, in this instance, is not a metaphor for awakening. It's a metaphor for death, and what's more, the second death. Because the oxygen was trapped inside of the balloon. And that's what we are seeing. The great awakening of humanity as the Christic forces intensify on this planet. People's egos, their beliefs, their tribalism, their desires, their fears, and their pride, right? Pride parades, this identity politics. It's all getting dialed up, is it not? It's all becoming more intense. And those of us who are on the path and can see through all that, and those of us who look within at our own defects and vices, and look on doing the work on ourselves to pop our many, many, many balloons in here, we use the opportunity that those balloons are expanding to pay attention to ourselves, and we use the opportunity of that intensification to do the work on our egos. Because just like in the pot of boiling water, there's more opportunity for individuals to break free when the surface of the water is a rapid boil. Because the surface tension is not there anymore. That would normally keep us trapped. Or the water is not frozen in ice like in the fridge, where it takes weeks for one molecule to be able for molecules to be able to evaporate. So that's the intensification, the turning up on the heat. and how what people expect and believe and believe they're entitled to, the great awakening and the mass global awakening, is a mass global awakening. But it's the same forces. They're feeling the same forces. They're just processing those forces through their mechanical selves, through their egos. And the stronger the ego gets, the weaker the soul gets, the weaker they are. Because the egos work from mechanical nature, and their job is to turn us into weaklings, to make us vulnerable, to make us fragile, so that when the cataclysm comes, fewer of us make it. And then there's the other aspect that we mentioned of people who become really rigid, and then they will shatter. But then there's the other aspect which we've talked about before, and that is this intensification of doubling down on egos, but still turning away from all the structures and the patriarchy and everything else, and giving ourselves back to nature, into off-grid, right, intentional communities and all that stuff. We've talked about this many times. Well, that was what nature really wants. Mechanical nature needs races of hominids who live like animals, who live in a very primal, live with Mother Nature, and she has the psychedelics and the shamanism and everything already prepared, and all of those people are diving into that, and they believe that's what's going to save them, and it is going to save them physically. Physically, it's going to save them to one degree or another. Pockets of little tribal intentional communities filled with people with their crystals and their beads, and they're smoking their marijuana and smoking their psychedelics, and enamored with their shamanism and their new age, and nature idolatry and their permaculture and everything on all that kind of stuff. And thousands of years from now, they'll be what the Aboriginal people are that are all around the world today. And they'll be descendants of this humanity, and they will want nothing to do with the golden age and the next humanity on this planet. They will be isolationist. They will be happy, one with nature, worshiping their ancestors, and they will be getting nowhere. They will be on the spiral of devolution. And on a long enough time frame, hominids like this devolve into primitive primates. That is why genetically we are so similar to chimpanzees, for example. And the great mountain gorillas are the descendants of the Hyperboreans, the giants. Those that gave themselves back to nature. That was how many? That was Aria, Atlantis, Lemuria, Hyperborea. That was 1, 2, 3, 4 humanities ago. 4 humanities ago. But you can see them, the lowland gorillas or the mountain gorillas, the 600-pound our so-called cousins. That's the other aspect of all of that. That's a different kind of a weakening. But again, gorillas and chimpanzees are 2 or 3 times as strong as a human being, and gorilla is probably 10 times, maybe 20 times stronger than a human being. So there's strength there, but that's not the strength. That's not the kind of strength that we're looking for, which is why a lot of these strongman competitions and everything else that people are going after, and all these extreme sports and so on and so forth, like the intensification is causing people to seek expressions of themselves and become superhuman, but becoming superhuman on the physical plane, doing superhuman strength and superhuman agility and superhuman dexterity and superhuman what have you. superhuman intelligence, superhuman intellect. Well, okay, but they're not awakening. It's a weakening, because where is their soul in all of that? Where's the perfection of the self, of the being in all of that? From where do we draw our true strength? And at the end of the harvest, what does the farmer look for to choose the best seeds for next year's crop? What is it inside of us that qualifies as the seed, as a good seed? Is it our physical prowess? Is it our intellect? Is it our agility? Is it our dexterity? Is it our ability to trade stocks and bonds at a profit, at a consistent profit? Are any of those things going to matter? Now, some practical things will matter. For example, genetic diversity. That's one of the reasons why mechanical nature is pushing diversity so with such a heavy hand, especially in North America and the United States and the melting pot, because it's imperative that the different races intermix and interbreed. We have mixed race children. It's imperative for that, for the next humanity, to have that genetic diversity. We can't continue on this tract of having these purebred, pure bloodlines, because a lot of the genetic problems that we face come from that. Just like purebred dog breeds often suffer from degenerative genetic diseases. And so crossbreeds and mutts, and with lots of different breeds mixed in there, that's important. And so that's one of the reasons why that aspect, the diversity aspect, but not the way that the woke are doing it with this forced diversity, where of what's called forced representation. That's not the right way. But diversity and inclusion is the right way. But again, the Black Lodge is so twisting and corrupting and degenerating that it's not having the desired results and the desired effect. I mean, to a degree, I suppose it's working, but at the moment, at least, it's also leading to a great deal of tribalism, and this woke philosophy or ideology that is just it's so detrimental to the spirit, right? Because it's the whole passive aggressive victim mentality. This is so antithetical to spirit. It's so antithetical to the being that hopefully some of the massive changes that are on their way socially and economically, politically, will help weed some of this out and then shake some of this stuff up, so that we keep only the good aspects of diversity and inclusion, and we lose all the tribalism. But part of us feels that that tribal aspect isn't going anywhere, or if it is somehow redacted from the mainstream narrative, it's going to survive in those isolated pockets of, and it's going to, especially in those groups that are isolating on the basis of environmentalism and nature idolatry. It's the best way to put it. Couple quick Azazel says, mechanical nature needs to feed on that which is left of the boiling soup. Azazel says, a soup with a taste of blood. And he also says that they are pushing it very hard in Sweden too, the diversity and inclusion. But this is all true, right? In the same way that the apple tree, let's face it, the apple tree needs to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rotting apples being absorbed back into the soil. It needs to have that. An apple tree wouldn't survive long if every single apple that it produced was picked. Just as a pot of boiling water wouldn't last long if every water molecule evaporated. How would we make our hard-boiled eggs? How would we make our soup? How would we make our tea or coffee or anything? Imagine if once it got to, you would have to devise a kettle that heated the water only to 99 degrees. Because if it reached 100, it would be like a cartoon, and the entire pot would just suddenly evaporate. And not only that, it would immediately turn your entire kitchen and house into a sauna. Right? So it's very practical. It's very practical. You can't have everything turning into water vapor like that, unless you're in a Batman movie, right? And you're Bruce Wayne and you Wayne Enterprises, and you create this microwave emitter that evaporates your enemy's water supply and instantaneously. That only happens in the movies, though. That doesn't even happen in an actual microwave. You can't do that in an actual microwave. So, again, we wanted to touch on this topic because of the times that we are in. And we have to, it's not about laying blame. It's not something to be taken personally. And it's not an opportunity for us to sit on our laurels and sit on our high horses and say, oh, well, look at all those foolish sleeping sheeple out there. And oh, I'm so great and I'm going to do this and I'm so awake and blah, blah, blah. Because no. But it does have something to do with like this, right? Okay, this is another serendipitous thing that showed up after we had decided what we were going to be talking about today. This, of course, are a bunch of New Agers in hell walking around chanting their mantra, live, laugh, love. This is just how it is. It's just how it goes. And in response to, we'll share something that popped up also on our feed. We'll just read it. We don't have to have it on the screen here. Again, this is a quote. O people of the earth, men born and made of the elements, but with the spirit of the divine man within you. Rise from your sleep of ignorance. Be sober and thoughtful. Realize that your home is not in the earth, but in the light. Why have you delivered yourselves over unto death, having the power to partake of immortality? Reflect and change your minds. Depart from the dark light of evil and forsake corruption forever. Prepare yourselves to climb through the 7 rings of the cosmos and to blend your souls with the eternal light. Some who heard him mocked and scoffed and went their way, delivering themselves to the second death, from which there is no salvation. But others, casting themselves before the feet of Hermes, besought him to teach them the way of life. He lifted them gently, receiving no approbation for himself, and staff in hand went forth teaching and guided mankind, and showing them how they might be saved. In the worlds of men, Hermes sowed the seeds of wisdom and nourished the seeds with the immortal waters. Those are the words of Hermes Trismegistus. And it heartens us to hear such words because it shows us that it's always been the same. The story has always been the same. The teachings have always been for the few. The masses have always mocked and turned away from the light. They have always chosen their dark light. They have always chosen this. It's just as the majority of water molecules stay in the pot and the majority of apples fall back to the earth and become rotten. They are never picked. It's just how it is. There is no mass global awakening. There is no mass global salvation. It does not and cannot work that way. And it certainly is not any sort of mechanical, automatic, you slip on a banana peel or trip on a crack in the sidewalk and fall into enlightenment. And expecting it, that it happens naturally, spontaneously, automatically, and believing yourself entitled to that makes you weak. Makes you a bad seed. Because the farmer doesn't save bad seeds. He doesn't plant his next year's crop with bad seeds. Doesn't do it. Does anybody have any questions or comments or anything to share on this topic, or anything else for that matter? You will obviously give people a chance to type their questions, or have anything they want to add or contribute in any way. But you will constantly run into people like this. You will constantly run into this over and over and over again. And we have to realize the uphill battle that we are on as individuals, and to take advantage of the intensification of the heat and the light, the Christic forces on this planet as individuals, to break free of our bonds, everything that locks us into any kind of belief system or any kind of adherence to the physical world, physical humanity. But when it comes to this boiling water and this pot of boiling water, it was Samael who said, the water must boil at 100 degrees for that which must be dissolved to dissolve, and that which must be crystallized to crystallize. It's a very astute and beautiful analogy, that the same boiling water that can dissolve a solid can reconstitute those very same molecules into a crystal. That's transmutation. And that's why we work in the Arcanum AZF. That's why we work in the Forge of Vulcan in sexual alchemy. To work in that heat, to work in the waters, in the fires in the waters of sexuality, to bring the waters to a boil without them boiling over and spilling all over the kitchen floor. But we bring those waters to a boil so that which must be dissolved can dissolve in those boiling waters, and that which must be crystallized can crystallize. To dissolve the egos that we have previously comprehended, and to crystallize the solar bodies from the mass, the substance of those dissolved egos, and the knowledge, the gnosis, and the consciousness that was liberated from those dissolved egos. It is a beautiful analogy of the Master Samael, and the intensification of the Christic forces on this planet assist us in that process in a very significant and meaningful way. And it is our hope and our intuition that a lot of what is being undermined and destroyed and dissolved right now in the intensification and the heat of the onslaught of tearing down many institutions and so on and so forth, the pillars and the foundations of civilization, will create the stuff that we can use in that turmoil, in that boiling water, in that the tumult, right? The hurly-burly, the tempest, right? That whole expression, tempest in a teapot. But the boiling water, we can then take the crumbling remnants of the corrupt institutions and synthesize and crystallize from those the arc, that we can have a kind of renaissance, a mini golden age of this humanity in preparation for its final destruction. So that is from where we stand, that for us is what the arc represents. An establishment of some subset of the population, the individuals, right? The individuals that are awakening, that to create some form, to crystallize some structure, some phenomenon that those who are authentically awakening, or on the verge or on the edge of authentically awakening, can be drawn to and recognize intuitively. They say, that's what I've been looking for. That's an expression. That's the arc. That's what's going to get me to where I want to be, which is the golden age. But I have to be a part of that. And I've got to let all of this other crap, leave all this other crap behind. How this is going to unfold, this is still a mystery to us. We have not been shown the details of that. But individuals are slowly beginning to flow and slowly beginning to trickle in. And it is our responsibility to put this into words and to publish books like the topic that we discussed today. Could very easily be a book, The Great Awakening, and explaining all of this to the normies, and explaining all of this to everybody who believes in the Great Awakening, the mass global awakening, and this really needs to be explained to them. And so far, we have topics to be covered in 3 books, with tentative titles being The Great Awakening, which we talked about today, and a few weeks ago we talked about The Pimp of Babylon. That's another proposed title. We think that'll be catchy because people have been so used to hearing the expression the whore of Babylon for so long, including the feminists, that the pimp of Babylon is it's so different. And then even feminists and woke people might potentially pick it up out of curiosity, saying, oh, this must be a feminist retelling of something or other, or it must be talking about the patriarchy, or who knows, right? So and then the third book is that the working title is Now Has Arc, right? We think we shared this with you. Now Has Arc. If you say it fast, Now Has Arc, Now Has Arc, Now Has Arc, right? Talking about the last part we just said there about the Atlas project, and about, ecosystem advanced human habitat, and sound empowered, enlightened metaphysical science, and all of the different components that we've shared with you in the past. Now as arc would be our opportunity to describe that and flesh all of that out and explain why all of those things are important for humanity in this transitional period, or how the next humanity will be based upon these technologies, these pillars, if you will. And but the foundations for that need to be created now, in the same way that in the golden age of Egypt, their science and technology and their know-how was an inheritance from the Atlanteans. It's you just look in the Egyptian pantheon of their own history, and it's right there that they arrived in Egypt on boats, and they were fleeing. They were survivors from Atlantis, and they brought with them all of this knowledge and know-how. And then when you look at the progress of Egypt, they progress progressively downward. So all of their greatest feats are in their golden age, and then from there it just goes downhill, because they're not able to create the same pyramids or have the same technology that they had at the beginning. So this will, of course, this needs to happen again. So this humanity has to have some sort of renaissance, even if it's localized, even if it's highly localized, and it only involves, like we say, a handful of ripe apples with good seeds. So one last call for comments or questions or feedback. Okay, we think we've given everyone fair enough warning, and there doesn't seem to be anyone wanting to ask or make a comment. So thank you for joining us. A little bit of a shorter talk today, but I think it's fine. I don't think we have to go 3 or 4 hours every time, unless you guys want to. But when everything's been said that needs to be said, then there's no reason to continue, right? There's no reason to just, fill the airwaves. That's why what we do is not content, right? That's we hate that word, and we're not here to create content, and you're not here to, waste time, right? So I think we are on the same page on that. So thank you for being here today. We hope that you'll join us again next week. One of the potential you're welcome awakened reflections, you're welcome. And Jennifer says, thank you for the amazing live stream. You're welcome, Jennifer. Oh, any idea of the timeline? Okay, timeline for the last part we were talking about, the building of the ark and all that stuff? Our lifetime. Our lifetime. That's why we're here. We're Attlas. We're here to the Attlas Project. That's what it's all about. Now, so we're turning 50 in June, and big changes are coming in 2023. Okay, so look, take this for what it's worth. We know that if we are who we feel we are, if we it's not something we think we are, but it's if we're right, okay, the total destruction of this humanity. Okay, now that's contentious, right? Because this happens in waves, right? So the first kind of so we're actually in it already. We're witnessing the erosion and the undermining of humanity on a metaphysical level. That's why we see like traditions, religions, history, even biology, everything is being undermined and questioned, and even truth itself, objective truth, is under threat and under attack, right? Everything is my truth now, right? Everything is subjective. So all of that, the great awakening is already underway. Now, the final destruction can't happen until the ark is complete, right? We're nowhere near building the ark. As Azil agrees, he sees it in practice too. The media rarely covers those left out. So the total destruction of this humanity cannot and will not happen until the ark is in place. Now, if we're right, and we have the blueprints for that ark, and we are the ones to set it up and establish it and attract all of the seeds that need to go into that ark and prepare for that final destruction, then the final destruction can come anytime after that ark is prepared. Now, again, take this with a grain of salt. When we have done this in the past, we lived for a considerably longer period of time than what one might consider a normal lifespan. In fact, we carried over, like the ark builder, according to tradition, both Attlas and Noah, Noah survived the flood. Attlas survived the destruction of Lemuria and established Atlantis. Atlantis is named after Attlas. It's the last time we did this was Lemuria. We didn't do this for Atlantis. We were at the beginning of Atlantis, because we were at the end of Lemuria, and we built the ark for the transition from Lemuria to Atlantis. And that's what we're doing again now. So if we are around, if we live to be 120 or 160, then the final destruction of humanity could come within that time frame. But we, at the moment at least, can't see the establishment of the ark, or what we're calling the ark, the Atlas project, taking less than 30 or 40 years. And maybe it's because we've been trained in our life to date to be very patient and to recognize how long things take. We're turning 50 and we're only now really beginning to do our life's work in earnest. Now, it's also possible that we're only here to plant the seeds of the ark and that somebody else is going to take over. It's also possible that we will be reborn and that we will reincarnate again as Attlas again and pick up where we left off at some point in the future, which means the final destruction of humanity could be, another century away, or more than a century away. It's really, we can't offer you, we can't provide any kind of insight as to a number. And that information is kept from us because there are a lot of things up in the air. There are a lot of different variables at play. It's not set in stone, in other words. It's not set in stone. In fact, the Third World War has been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, or held back, if you will, by the bastards of the White Lodge to give humanity more time. And even now, this week, the way that war is unfolding, it seems to be unfolding as a proxy war in Ukraine, where officially Ukraine and Russia are at war. Unofficially, all of NATO and all of the Western countries are at war with Russia, Iran, and China, and everyone else backing up Russia. But that's unofficially. That's what's practically happening, because Russia the West is providing equipment and expertise to Ukraine, but Ukraine has to fight the war on their own. But you saw this week that Germany is now humming and hawing about providing tanks. So this whole thing the way the Third World War is unfolding is very unexpected. Certainly the media and very few people, right, openly talking about the Third World War taking place in Europe as we speak, between the superpowers, between Russia and the West. Certainly very few people are talking that way. But that's practically what's going on. And all you need to do is look up a couple videos by Peter Zayin to find someone who is talking about it that way. Azazel says, what matters is humble service, and there will be a nice surprise in one way or the other. Well, let's hope so. Mugaboo says, once everything is in place, things can change pretty quickly. Yes, absolutely, no question, no question. So this is why we're saying we can't give you an exact number, and we can't say that it's centuries out, or we're talking about, centuries, or how many decades exactly, and so on and so forth, because the way that we've designed things, once things are set up, things can escalate very rapidly, and can grow organically very rapidly, and indeed exponentially. We've designed things to be that way. And as Mugaboo says here, once things are in place, things can change very quickly, because look, if there was a pole shift and the poles shifted to the equator, humanity would be wiped clean within a few days. Okay, so if you're interested, we can we will find the video, and we'll post it on our because what happens is, if the crust, the mantle of the Earth, shifts because of a shift in the magnetic poles, which happens on a regular basis, and we're due for a magnetic pole shift. That's one of the things that Master Samael, we believe, describes, but certainly other people in their talking about the end times talk about a pole shift. And the magnetic pole has been moving, and its movement has been accelerating. So if it shifts and the magnetic poles of the Earth reverse, then the poles themselves fall to the equator. And when that happens, the oceans and the atmosphere are still spinning in their normal orbit, in their normal direction. So because of inertia, the water will now slosh over the continents in what amounts to a 200-meter high tsunami. And there is evidence of this. You can see evidence of this in Eastern Africa, where there was an incredible deluge and a flood, and then it retreated back into the ocean. Now, this is also probably when the heart of Atlantis sank into the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. So again, it's difficult to get all this across in detail. At the tail end of a live stream, this seems like talking more the nuts and bolts of things, and how things are going to unfold in a kind of in the actual uh, physical planet, and the actual destruction, and how things are going to take. This seems to me something that will require meditation on our part, and preparation in advance for a live stream that's just talking exclusively about this. But if that's something that interests you, we can certainly prepare for that, and we can certainly dedicate a show for that in the future. Just know that all of this is becoming more and more top of mind, and more things are showing up along these lines. So Awakened Reflection says that would be a nice topic. I don't know if it would be a nice topic, but it would be a topic, and it would be a pertinent, relevant topic. The thing about it, though, is the reason why we don't focus too much on it is for the same reason that we mentioned earlier, is that a lot of things are still up in the air. A lot of things are still undecided. Humanity is being given a tremendous amount of leeway here to allow for things to fall into place, and to allow for the maximum number of people to be able to awaken, and to prepare properly. And so this has been one of our frustrations, of us having to wait this long until we're turning 50 before we can actually begin in earnest. And the reason why we've been waiting is because it's again, humanity being given some more time and some more chance. Azazel says, yes, even the Black Lodge has has the way for the White Lodge to make their move, has to wait for the White Lodge to make their move. Yeah, he corrected himself. As Azil says, yeah, the wait is something we object to. It's look, it is what it is. It is what it is, and believe me when I say that patience is a virtue, and that cliche is a cliche for a reason, because it's absolutely true. And more often than not, any delay that we're facing in life is actually working to our advantage. But having said that, we can tell you that we accomplished something of pinnacle importance last year, and that was that 35-minute video. Its real significance and importance has not yet been felt by anyone. Well, perhaps individuals, but it won't be until we do these 3 books this year that, and maybe more, that the significance and the impact of our work in 2022 will start to have an impact. And all we can say is we can't say much because information is on a need-to-know basis, and we don't want to put undue pressure or stress or place our expectations or set false expectations. But indications are that things are moving. So indications are that the wait is over. 2023 is going to be bringing changes one way or another that are the first movements of a real sea shift happening. And once it begins, there's no stopping it, right? So you guys keep coming out, keep showing up, keep sharing, and like and subscribe and all that crazy stuff that they tell you to do, because we will certainly keep you abreast of the latest developments as we know them and as we're given the information and given permission to share what information we're given. Because generally speaking, it's kept from us, because I guess the masters know that anything they share with us, we're going to share with you. So I guess we're a bit of a blabbermouth that way. So listen, when we know it, you'll know it. When we know it, you'll know it, because we'll share it with you. So on that note, as Azil says, yeah, for sure, those thirsty will drink. So again, thanks for coming out, and we hope to see you again next week. Have a great week, and all the best. And as always, inferential peace. Take care.